Oh, it's a wonderful question whether I've ever been the only woman.
Hell yes.
I've been the only woman in many situations, but I've never felt it's a particular obstacle. I think I feel sad that I'm the only woman in the room, but it's certainly never been a problem. In fact, I tend to sort of make sure that I feel empowered by it, and I use it to my advantage. Sometimes actually men are easier to be more direct to in terms of arguing your point.
Very easy to overthink the fact that you are the only woman in the room and how people might perceive you. And as I've become more experienced and a bit more confident in myself, personally and professionally, I have stopped thinking about gender and the fact that I am the only woman in the room. And sometimes in hindsight, you realise that people in the room have judged you or have not listened to what you've said because you are a woman. But at the time in that meeting, I just try and focus on the fact that I've got as much right to be there as anybody else.
I think the biggest and most interesting story, and I hope one that has changed over time, that no woman would find herself in this position now, was when I was running a very big crew as a set designer, and I had a crew of 70 men below me. They were all men. And it was almost impossible to give a direct command that anybody would follow. So you fell into a pattern where you had to let people think they'd come up with the thing you wanted them to do so that it was their idea when they would happily follow it through. And it absolutely added to the pressure of the day. But that's what you had to do if you were a woman trying to run an exclusively male crew.
There were always obstacles. I don't think that in the first 20 or so years of my career, I was prepared to acknowledge them to myself. And there were obstacles that came from being a white South African in Britain for reasons that are perfectly understandable, not that I supported that regime, but being a woman itself for many years for me was absolutely, yes, an obstacle. I think there is a stage and an age when, because you're a girl, when you speak, you're dismissed. Thereafter, you're not the office totty anymore. And it was very difficult in my time, let's say the 80s and the 90s, to establish oneself and one's uses beyond being just a pretty face. If I look back now, I think there were many times of feeling that when you spoke, the men in the room were going, why are you talking? You're female. Why are you talking? And that was definitely an obstacle. And I do know that when I had one of my biggest promotions, the men who were going to have to report to me were absolutely stunned that it could happen, that a woman was put in that position. So that whole bubble of attitude was an obstacle, is an obstacle.
As an advisor to boards of major corporations, I'm sadly almost always one of the only women. Sometimes there'll be another woman, which is thrilling, absolutely wonderful, and maybe if I'm lucky there's a few. I'd love to say differently, but often that's the case. I hope it'll change. How do I deal with that? I definitely don't masculinize myself, and what I mean by that is become some pseudo-man. I think the idea of men feminizing themselves to become more appropriate in the board or at top levels is ludicrous. I actually plunge into being authentically a feminine leader and a powerful woman. And what I mean by that is I don't cover my femininity, or nor do I necessarily play to stereotypical ways of being a woman. I believe that women have immense power exactly as they are. For me, it's very important to celebrate being a female. Being a woman is a distinct advantage. I'm not in competition with the men in the room. I'm their advisor anyway. But being a woman actually somehow disrupts and disarms the dynamics that are going on. And funnily enough, that means that they can hear me, which is wonderful.
I don't think so. I honestly don't think so, because if so, sometimes it really represents an advantage. Diversity, whether if it's on gender or nationality, represents an advantage. And I really have never thought about the gender issue. I've been lucky enough to work in an environment where at least I feel very safe in that context. I understand it's not the case for many other women in the world, and depending on the circumstances and industries, this changes massively. But personally, no, I haven't.
I haven't really faced any sort of overt sexism. I think I've been quite lucky working in the HR industry, and I've also always worked for very enlightened organisations, and really organisations that put performance before other demographic factors.
Being a woman and also being quite short and looking quite young, people don't expect that much from you, and therefore don't think that you're going to be able to achieve what you want to achieve. So in one of the assignments that I was tasked, my director had been tasked this, and they came to me and said, can you help? And I was given some really menial things to do, and I went home and thought that's not what I'm here to do. I want to be able to use my brain and show my brain. And I went home and put together a document of the whole strategy, and came back in, and everyone thought, oh, well, that's not necessarily what we asked you to do. And it was only when it got put in front of the senior leader, who said it was really good, did anyone actually come back to me and say, oh, we think that's good. But right at the beginning, the kind of middle management kind of put it to the side and thought, oh, well, you can't come up with something good, therefore we'll do it ourselves.
When I started in advertising in South Africa, it was different than being in the UK. Why? Because although it was very much a male-dominated industry in a very male-dominated society, as indeed it still is today, in the workplace we were not so concerned about the position of women in the workplace as we were concerned about with apartheid. In the workplace, your everyday was dominated by the colour issue. So you working in advertising, South African Broadcasting Corporation at the time was the only television station. And there were two channels, one for black people and one for white people. So our world was that world. Our world was not a world of sexual discrimination or discrimination against women.
I've faced a number of obstacles being a person, not just a woman who happens to have had a kid. The biology on it means I have to carry the kid and I have to have the kid. Can't do anything about that. That was down to Mother Nature. But I think I felt that I was unfairly penalised in my career for not just making that decision, but for my simple biological makeup, something I can't change, that my husband's career continued to flourish and mine just came to a standstill.
I was reporting back to a board of a bank about a really serious issue I'd been working with them on. And that morning I woke up and I thought, oh, I don't want to wear my Ponzi dress, my Ponzi suit. Oh God, I don't want to do it. And my head said to me, I want to wear skinny jeans. But my logic said to me, also the other side of my brain said, oh, you daren't do that. That's the end of your career virtually.
I'm a fairly casual dresser, and I don't wear skirts, and I wear jeans every day. And I do wear a lot of flats.
I've always been small, and I accepted that fact. But I wear high heels because I feel intrinsically more confident, I think more stylish. But I don't know why I wear heels actually. I like them.
But I think there is something about armour that sometimes you just need that bit of extra help to feel in control. And I do it for myself, but I do think that sometimes high heels and nail polish do make me feel more buttoned up.
Anyway, the skinny jeans won because actually I know now I have to wear what I'm really comfortable in. Otherwise I can't show up fully.
I do that for myself to make me feel like, it's the Beyonce Sasha Fierce thing. It's like sometimes you just have to put on an exterior.
So I arrive at this major bank. I have a jacket on, nice jacket, skinny jeans and very high heels. And the chairman sees me and says, oh my God, you're a woman. And I said, well, yes. Has it only just struck you?
As a bisexual woman, I will present in a different way depending on the day and the appropriateness for the occasion. So I feel personally much more liberated about ideas of femininity and masculinity, and are much more in tune with what's the appropriateness for this particular occasion and how to be elegant if elegance is required, and elegance applies to men and to women. Professional, if it's a professional setting. Again, men and women both have to be professional.
Quite recently actually I saw someone with a very small skirt. And I think that is not appropriate. You want to be taken seriously for your job and not but how do you look. I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong in being feminine and being nice and pretty and elegant or whatever the style is. But I think provoking, especially in a very strong male environment, is unprofessional. And it might lead to other things that other women have fought very hard in order to be taken seriously.
I appreciate that there are very strong forces at work that demonstrate to us that there's a particular way that we ought to look.
We were then in the lift going up to this boardroom, and he said, "Do you think you're going to have command? Do you think they'll take you seriously?" So I said, "Here's the deal. I'll do a bet with you. At the end of the day, I'll do what I was going to do anyway. At the end of the day, you tell me whether I have gravitas." So we did the whole day, everything went as planned. And afterwards we were debriefing about the day, and he was saying goodbye to me. And I said, no, hang on. You promised that you'd debrief about, give me feedback about this. And he said, "Danusha, it's nothing to do with what you wear. If you've got gravitas inside, you could be wearing a paper bag and you'd hold your own."
But I do admit at some point in my career, especially when I was working in Asia and in Middle East, to put more makeup just to pretend to be a little bit older and to pretend to be a little bit more senior, because in some countries when you are female and young, people tend to take you less seriously. So I do admit putting heels and makeup just to pretend to be older, yes.
One of the beauties of getting older is that some of that falls away a little and the pressures for some of those things disappear. That's great. I'm very pleased as I have a young daughter. She's 18 years old. I see in her and many of her friends that they don't experience those same pressures, which is great. But I also see that the rise of pressure on young men to look in a particular way is increasing, and that I think is a worry. I don't think that's reaching us to good equality where men need to suffer in the same way as women for their looks, and I can see that there's been a strong rise on the pressure for young men, and that I think is a concern that we should all share and work to address.
And I learnt so much by honouring what I needed that day. I'm not suggesting people go to work in tutus. It's got to be something appropriate. So I wear what I like now.
I'm a psychologist by background. I've done a lot of research. One of the phases of my career was around R&D. And it's really important that we don't perpetuate certain myths around what helps or hinders women's careers. And I think there are a lot of myths out there, lots of anecdotes about what helps women and what might hinder women's careers. Having said that, though, there is actually good evidence to suggest that women, when it comes to being promotable or to be seen to be promotable, actually need to have more objective evidence on their CVs or resumes before they're given the opportunity to move up to the next levels.
I do think women have to work twice as hard to get somewhere in their careers. It doesn't mean I think that they should. In my time in industry, certainly it was so. But one of the things we have to work hard at, and Sheryl Sandberg actually has a point, is this business of leaning in. And I know that became a buzzword and then became something people didn't want you to say, but women have to learn to work really hard at saying, I'm in this for the run and I want X and I want you to give me X and I'm working hard at getting you to give me X. I think we work incredibly hard and then don't say what we want. So then we find ourselves automatically working twice as hard. So I do think that women are not good, in the main, some are, at self-advancement and at, if you like, God help us, self-promotion.
I don't know about working twice as hard. I think it's just the initial getting in, that's the problem. Once we're in, it's fine from there, but it's just the initial, it's getting down those gates of iron and getting in the first place.
No, I don't think women need to work twice as hard to get what they want. But what I do think is that the women need to be very smart and savvy about being recognised for what they do. So taking the time to ensure that the right people know what you've done, how you contributed, and why that's of value.
I think in some industries women do need to work twice as hard. I take my mum as an example. She's a doctor and she had to work so much harder before she had kids in order to get a reputation, so that when she went off to have kids and come back, that her reputation would still be there. So if both my parents are doctors, if you look at how hard my mum worked compared to my dad before she had kids, there was a significant increase in that. And actually it almost drove her, because then she worked so hard to get such a good reputation that she could take that kind of time off to look after us. And then once we'd all grown up and she's gone back, she's kind of flown and has achieved so much more.
I think to work twice as hard would lead to intense burnout and pretty damn quick. I think it would be detrimental to women to do so, and I think many women try to do that. I think we already have a double kind of emotional labour and literal labour. Certainly for women that are caring for others, whether it's children, whether it's elderly parents, whether it's actually any responsibility. What I think is important that we pull back from being perfectionists and we take much more care of ourselves. What I do believe is that to be strategic is important, and to plan and work smarter, that's much more important than to work harder.
The Queen Bee syndrome is a really fascinating idea. So the idea is that women don't progress in organisations because once they get to a certain point, and once we get to a certain point in organisations, we rely on sponsorship of more senior people. And the idea is that once women get to that point and they have or they need senior sponsorship, that more senior women start pulling up the ladder behind them. And therefore women don't actually progress in the organisation. I actually don't see a lot of convincing evidence for this particular phenomenon. And I also feel that we're sometimes not being very fair on senior women. I see lots of amazing senior women who really support younger women coming up the career ladder. And there are also lots of men in organisations that don't support other younger men coming up the career ladder. We can't always expect every woman to be warm and nurturing. I think there's some stereotypes that we're sometimes falling prey to. There is no evidence for the Queen Bee syndrome as such. I'm really passionate that we don't perpetuate those myths.
I make sure that I'm available to any of the females that work within Viacom, but I think there is a need for them to put themselves forward. So my door is always open, and I definitely put myself out at things to help women. But it is also up to them to to come and seek out help or advice. So I think that, again, you've got to be bold, you've got to be brave, and you've got to push yourself, and you'll definitely find amazing women everywhere.
I mean, undoubtedly, there is lots of good research that says that if you're a woman, and then people have certain expectations of how you dress, how you behave. So, for example, we do know that women who are very, quite assertive, really know what they want out of work, and are not afraid of sharing that. Now, those women often get labelled as aggressive, whereas men who engage in similar behaviours, for them it's assertiveness. Whereas men who are very nurturing of their teams, develop their teams, get lots of extra brownie points for that. Women don't. So I think we have just different expectations.
I think sometimes it can be expected of you to possibly change who you are slightly to fit in with the stereotype of what makes a good leader if the leaders that you have seen are men and they have very traditionally male characteristics. There's a group of women in the industry of a similar seniority to me, and I suppose a similar age and experience, who don't think that you need to be like that. And I suppose the question is still there as to whether we can make that change. I suppose we can move into those positions, those more senior positions, without having to be traditionally male in our personalities or really demanding or aggressive.
If you're strategic, you can be seen as conniving as a woman. If you're strategic as a man, you're a success.
I've worked for, ever since my career began, I've worked for a lot of amazing women who were extremely smart and very much, had different types of personalities, as you would expect. Some were a lot tougher, some were a lot more flawed or insecure, but they were all extremely bright at what they did. And I think the ones that were probably most successful were the ones who were most self-aware.
Another myth, for example, that that exists is that we often say women leave organisations because of work-life balance issues and childcare issues. And actually, when we then look at objective exit data, why have some of these amazing women left the organisation? It's actually because they've been given opportunities elsewhere, more responsibility, or often because they've been offered a better paying job. So sometimes these are lazy excuses for organisations to say, well, there's not much we can do about this. It's just the way it is. So looking at data, really understanding what drives women's careers and everyone's careers are really important.
I think that sadly girls are still segmented into the traditional arenas that are appropriate for females. And I think somewhere along the line, there are still stories about, oh, it'll be okay, I can be on an equal footing until I have my children. Then things might change.
We were the first generation that was given that impetus, was given that fuel by our parents, like work hard in your GCSEs, work hard in your A-levels, go to university, get on a graduate programme. And I did all those steps, and then I had a child and the door was closed.
So my first child, the company wasn't supportive. When I tried to return, they filled the vacancy. In those days they could. Today that wouldn't happen.
Women having children, I had my children exceptionally young. So we have women in their early 20s through to late 40s. So what we have now is a workforce that actually is all women with the capacity and potential to have children. That is a real problem for organisations because they don't know what to do.
I'm a hard-working, determined person, and I was broken by the system. And I think because I'd experienced work-life balance in Amsterdam, where most mothers go back on a 3-day week, no question. When I put my request in for flexible working, I loved the company, they loved me, there's no bad will whatsoever, but they had to decline it because a decision to give me flexible working would mean that it would impact other people. It would mean they would have to have it, and they couldn't have a blanket approach. And I just had a eureka moment where I was like, so my life choices, everything I've worked towards, are being determined on someone else's ovaries. And that seemed a very bizarre concept. So I quit my job the next day and started Mother Pucker.
I hate the way that women who work and women who choose to be in the home, looking after the home and looking after the children. I hate this kind of, I'm a stay-at-home mother, oh, you're a career mother, all this stuff. I, as a career woman, found it very tough when my daughter was small because I had a lot of so-called stay-at-home mums saying to me, oh, well, it's all right for you, blah, blah, blah. And it's just not. It's just not. I've never denigrated the role of a stay-at-home mother. It is what I wanted for myself. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mother and I could not be. So it wasn't a choice. I think the thing about that whole discussion about can you have it all? Yes, you can. You can. I did. Am I saying it's fun, easy? No, it's not. It's really, really tough. Would I change anything? No, absolutely wouldn't change a thing.
When I was an academic, nobody knew I had children. That was a strategy. Nobody knew I had children. I actually believe that some of my success was because I didn't shout about the fact that I had 5 young children.
So when I was much younger, I was painfully shy. I found it very difficult to speak up in company, and I had a lot of things I wanted to say, but I found it very difficult to be able to find the voice to say them. So I regret that time. It was difficult not to be able to have a voice. One of the things that I absolutely learned from that is how important it is to have your voice and to use it and to not miss those opportunities and to regret that. So what I would advise other people who are feeling those same difficult and very difficult, hard feelings, is to have a go, be courageous, be bold for that. Find your voice and use it appropriately and well.
I remember when, I'm not going to mention any names, but I remember when I started a new telly job somewhere, and one of the heads of that station got me into a room and said, right, now listen, we don't want you to bring too much of a Caribbean flavour to our show. I mean, you know, what did he think I was going to do? Come in the morning and say, good morning, little children, Jah Rastafari! But instead of me, you know, facing up to him, I didn't, because I was too scared that if I said anything, I wouldn't get the job. And so I kept quiet. And every time I think about, even now, every time I think about it, it just makes me so cross of myself.
I'd like to share a story with you from the more risky side of my own personal history. And it was when I was working as a location manager on a television series at one of the major film studios in the UK, and this is about 25 years ago. Also on the lot was a big external set for a massive feature film. Again, I can't name it because it was a really big blockbuster movie. And it was my job to go and tell the construction crew, which consisted mainly of riggers, that they had to be quiet while we were turning over because we were also filming externally. I went onto the set. I went to the head rigger and I asked them to be quiet. I assumed they would understand because we're all in the same business and they understand how it works. And I'm afraid I'm here to say that they pulled my top down and smeared my lipstick across my face and laughed and weren't quiet. I did manage to talk them round. I didn't give up. I didn't let them put me down, but I did go and report them to the studio management, and this is a significant film studios. And they said, well, yes, they had complaints from other women who were finding it quite threatening and intimidated to go anywhere near that particular part of the lot because they were quite a jolly handful, was the way they put it, but that they couldn't afford to upset the producers of the film because they were a big American company, so therefore they didn't intend to do anything about it. And I let that go, and I shouldn't have done.
When I was younger, there were aspects of sexual harassment which were very difficult, and I found it hard to find my voice being a woman in a mostly male-dominated world. I did find it difficult to speak out about those things and to find the right help at the right time. But as I got older, I became stronger in myself and I became bolder in myself and more able to speak up. So what I have done in the past is to find the right people to talk to and to speak up quickly in the moment, to follow through with other people who are trustworthy and that can do something about it, and then not allow other people to let it lie because it's more comfortable for everybody else. I think if that ever happens to you, then you should make sure that you let people know and that you ask for appropriate action to be taken.
The moment when I felt definitely not bold, like weak, I suppose is the word, is when I suffered our third miscarriage, and I was at work, and I felt that it was something that I didn't want to discuss with my company because of fear that they'd be thinking she's getting pregnant, so we're going to have to start rehashing her work, you know, and I felt that there would be a sense that they were losing me, and that line between me entering motherhood and wanting to retain my career, there wasn't going to be a crossover, so it was a head in the sand approach. And so I sat at my desk bleeding miscarrying, and I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want to have to lie about why I was off, and I didn't want to, I think, accept weakness. Men don't miscarry, and it felt like that would put me at a disadvantage. So I ploughed on, and that was bad for everyone involved. Myself, my husband, and ultimately my work.
So in answer to your question, sometimes when you want to be bold, you know, I can understand, because I've had to back down. It's so easy for me to sit here and say, you know, if somebody criticises you, if they make a racist comment, if they make a sexist comment, you know, do something about it there and then. It's so easy to say that until you're in the situation. So in answer to your question, all I can say is, if you're not in a situation where you can be bold right back at that instant, be bold by being amazing at what you do. And hopefully that should help to shut them up.
My inspiration was, as a child growing up, the local broadcaster. I thought she was just so fantastic. Her diction was clear, and I loved her radio programs for women particularly. And I thought, that's what I want to be when I grow up.
I did find, and I know this wouldn't be fashionable, but I did find people like Margaret Thatcher inspirational to me as a woman. Today, I'm inspired by the young leaders that we get to know, especially from disadvantaged countries and disadvantaged circumstances, who are absolutely forthright, fearless and dynamic in correcting what they see in front of them. It brings me to my knees.
I've been very lucky in that I've had lots of inspiring people along the way, and sometimes there were people who were 1 or 2 steps ahead of me in the job that I was doing, and in a way they kind of showed how you can overcome the next hurdle, maybe a promotion, maybe taking on a difficult project, maybe how you balance work and life and a young family. Right now, the people who inspire me have changed. For me, it's around looking around and finding new people all the time. It's something I draw a lot of energy from, being able to talk to other people and almost having my own personal advisory board of people who I can touch base with every now and then.
First role model, definitely my mum. She grew my sister and I up on quite a tough council estate in South London, and she did it on her own. It wasn't easy, but despite our circumstances, Mum always said to us, this place where we are is no barrier to what you can do with your lives. You can do anything as long as you equip yourselves and apply yourselves and have enough belief. And I watched her, in very difficult circumstances, start up her own business, and she used the proceeds from her business to take care of my sister and I. She did a fantastic job. So she was a great source of inspiration for me. And also, believe it or not, Anton Deck. You know, these are just regular lads, not from privileged backgrounds, and really, really likeable. And I thought, you know what? If Anton Deck can, I think I can as well.
My mum was a woman from Holland who never had brakes on her bike, never. She'd hurtle down hills and just use her feet to stop. And I think her view was that as women, as people, you can do things that other people say that might not be right or that doesn't feel right. You should have brakes. And she's like, I've got feet. There's always another way around something. So I think her feeling was persistence, and I think that persistence is where I'm coming from, that I don't want my daughter to hit the same brick wall, the same door as I did when I had her and wanted to have a career at the same time.
Since becoming a mother, I suppose, in quite a cheesy way, I've been inspired by my daughter. Having a child changes your life fundamentally, but it also makes you think about the decisions you're making and what you want from your life. makes you reflect on things you possibly wouldn't otherwise reflect on. And for me, it's certainly at this stage of my life, it's important for me to be a good role model to her and to show her that women can achieve whatever they want to achieve, and that shouldn't be a barrier to you doing what you want to do in your life.
I went to an engineering conference. The topic of role models came up. So first of all, a lot of these women, amazing engineers in their own right, were asked whether they could name some role models, some engineering role models, and there were very few examples in coming from the round. They presented results of a survey. They had asked school-aged girls about role models. And what emerged was that actually, I think it was Beyoncé and the Kardashians were role models, but mothers were also role models, so that was, I thought, was very, very heartening. But there is something around how we show young women what it is that they, that they can do, should aspire to, and I think there is the worry. So a lot of organisations are doing great outreach work. There are lots of great organisations that really help women in senior roles to go into schools and to share what it's like to be an engineer, to be a scientist, to be an accountant, a partner in an accountancy firm. So for me, it's around making sure that we have more real-life role models in schools.
I think it's really important for positive role models across all walks of life. Whether it's male, female, or whether it has to do, with ethnicity. I just think it's really important that we highlight the best of society rather than the lowest common denominator of society. So I think that should just be a general rule. But I also think that there have been some amazing women who have really, stepped out and had their voices heard. And, if you think about Ariana Huffington, and she's been so vocal in what women, or actually just people, need to do to be successful in terms of looking after their physical and mental health. And Sheryl Sandberg has obviously done an amazing amount of work with Lean In on, again, it's being brave and being bold and putting yourself forward and not sitting at the back of the room, but actually putting yourself front and center and speaking up. So I think that is happening, but I think, like everything, we have to continue to push the good to the top and push inspiration out in all forms.
In the last few years particularly, we're getting some really good role models that we can all see and follow. Emma Watson, for example, with her campaign. For better or ill, we see people like the Kardashian women doing extremely well in their professional lives. There are many great examples, and I think it's super important that women see different ways of being. Whatever your background, whatever your colour, whatever your creed, I think it's extremely important that we have all those things. Yes, things are progressing, but I think we still have a mainstream media and a mainstream life that does show us more of one side than another, and we need to see more of what other possibilities exist.
Well, you won't know this, but I used to write for television, and I think that actually I bring this to the writers. So if you look at some of the central soaps that we have, they're just innately sexist. The women are relying on their physical attributes, they're looking for relationship, that's all they're defined by, and I think that is incredibly detrimental. So the storylines that we have on television are crucial. So for instance, The Good Wife has been very powerful. How to Get Away with Murder. If you watch that, the storylines are so engaging because you've got power portrayed in different ways. And that's what we need.
I think my big bold moment was when I quit my job, and then the next day I launched the Flex Appeal campaign, which is to push for flexible working.
I was at a 75th birthday function for the British Council, and the then CEO introduced me to someone and said, "This is Kate, she's setting up this thing, One Young World, for 1,300 young leaders from every single country in the world," and then walked off. And the man to whom he'd introduced me said, "I won't use a swear word here." He said, "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life," and walked off. So I think setting up One Young World was a bold thing and a bold thing for change.
A few years ago I went on a conference called One Young World, and there I heard a girl talk about her experiences of abuse that she went through. And that struck a chord with me because 8 years prior to that I'd been in a very abusive relationship but never really spoken about it. And this girl really made me see that actually through something bad can come something good. And so I took it upon myself to start making a difference, and I went out and spoke about my experiences and have started up a charity because of it. And for me that's the boldest I've ever been, is actually kind of conquering a fear and speaking about it to try and help other people.
I think one of the biggest moments of my advancement was when I was in a big theatre, lecture theatre, in a university in which I was a senior woman. And I looked down and I saw a multitude of bald heads and badly designed jackets. And I realised I was one of the very few women, and I was also considerably younger, and there wasn't very far to go for me to actually reach my ceiling. And I had maybe 25, 30 years left, if not more. And I went home and I thought, what am I going to do about that? So I actually threw in my tenured career, basically a lifelong career with the salary that came with that. And I did a massive leap and worked, built my own consultancy, and actually trusted that word of mouth would be perfect for me, and it would be okay, that I didn't need to particularly market, that my reputation would take me and I would actually make an impact and build this consultancy.
I was very motivated, and I soon realised that I needed extra skills to enhance myself and to progress. So I attended evening classes as a young woman and learnt audio typing, which I didn't particularly like, but I realised that I made myself more employable. And whilst working in any industry, I grabbed the opportunity to go to any training class to make myself progress, no matter what the training was. And after each pregnancy, I didn't return to that particular role. I sought a job of a higher status. So I think I was very lucky.
10 years ago, I was already willing to move positions, but neither my line manager or my boss's boss was interested in it. So I thought I would look outside, and I was already looking to move out of the company. So I felt I had nothing to lose. When one day I saw the very big boss in his office alone. It was a crystal office, like a Shark Tank. And I remembered that person was totally obsessed with Ferraris, because she used to quantify the sales loss by number of Ferraris. So I knocked on his door and I said, sir, you don't know me, which is totally fine, but I think I'm a Mini Cooper. And one day I'll become a Ferrari. Do you want to lose a Ferrari? And that was actually my first promotion.
I look at the 35 years that I spent in one industry, which was effectively the whole of my first career. The sad thing is that the key stage of advancement really came with working for a man who was very concerned with the promotion of women, but who also didn't see one as a woman, just saw one as a colleague. And then during the time that I worked for him, which was 13 years, he started to actively seek to promote women.
The next big point, I suppose, was taking my PhD, because having a title really helped for other people to be able to recognise my knowledge and experience. I think sometimes it's easy for other people who don't know you, particularly when you're a young woman, you can be overlooked. And I found that was a super helpful moment to crown that.
The fact that we still have to talk about this is kind of the annoying thing, because it's like guys or girls are both the same. We can run a company, we can go to space, we can do anything we want. So I think talk about it so that we don't have to talk about it. I think making sure that women support each other, and that we are getting, and we're also pushing ourselves to get in that room and to speak up and realise that there is an expectation of anybody. So you have to be able to, I knew that I wanted this job and I'd have to be a really good public speaker to do it. So I worked on that and I did that. And I think you have to be prepared to do the hard things. But if you are, you'll get there. So I think support each other and push yourself.
In order to help empower women in the future, I think the biggest thing is investing in our young generation. That's one of the main things that Stand Tall does. If we can help young girls and young boys understand about equality and moving forward and the effects of abuse and bullying, then I think our society growing up will be very different. I think the society that we have at the moment, the young generation growing up completely different to how we all grew up, with the effects of social media and how that can harm people, boys and girls, and I really think that that's one of the main focuses that we need to focus on in order to help empower our younger generation.
We need to be clear on what we want, we need to make plans and then go for it. And actually when we do that, we accomplish pretty well anything we want. Women are remarkable.
Most important thing anybody can do in any kind of ask for the advancement to equality, not beyond, but to the equality of women, the most important thing is men. Absolutely the most important thing is men. It is very rare in the workplace, whether it's in an NGO, as I am now, or in a business, or in education, it is very rare the girl or the woman who doesn't believe that she should be treated equally or should have equality. Many women are prepared to fight for that. It's a far, far better thing to work with men and encourage men and communicate with them so that men understand of us as women exactly what we see of ourselves in the workplace. I do think that the United Nations Emma Watson slogan, he for she, is incredibly important. If men and boys aren't trained into this and backing this, it's a zero-sum game. It's a fight to the end.
I have seen a lot of amazing male leaders, male colleagues who really advocate for change and change from within the system. Great role modeling, so all of us can do something. All of us can call out these little micro inequalities and these little sort of micro situations of exclusion that we see every day, and we can do that in a very natural way. So I think all of us can do something, even if it's just a small thing, to actively bring someone into a conversation, actively reaching out and actively encouraging someone else. So there is a lot we can all do.
At this point, I'd like to fly the flag for a slightly less well-recognised demographic, which is older women. And there are less of them, that's fact, working in senior roles and that get promoted up to the more significant opportunities. I am one, and I'd like to hope that I'm going to be kicking down that particular glass ceiling as much as I can, and that there is always something that you should be reaching for, if only it's about learning something or doing something new or different.
I would advise any other woman to take stock, to look at where she is, where she wants to go, to focus, to be determined, to care for others, and in her rise to fame or success up the ladder, be careful not to crush others on the way up, because you never know, you might have to meet those same people on the way down and you need their support.
Be compassionate towards ourselves and to be compassionate towards other people. To allow people opportunities, to give other people a fair go. I think that's extremely important. To offer up the hand of friendship, to give other people chances that you yourself might not have had, or that are being given to you but that might be better served by somebody else. To give encouragement, to give feedback that's going to be helpful, not just say things are good if they're not really, but to help people to be really targeted so that they can develop. I think that's super important. I think it's also incredibly important that we speak out and address structural change and things that are very difficult for others. So, for example, we know that more than 70% of the world's poor are women. We know that many of those women live in single parent households. We know that domestic violence and abuse disproportionately affects women and LGBT people. I think it's super important that we address those inequalities and difficulties so that everybody has a chance for their own success.
I'd love to single-handedly change the world and make the world a better and more equal place for women, but I'm pretty sure I'm not going to do that alone. I probably don't have time to do that, actually. But I think it's again a series of just small steps and small acts which help women and allow them to be more confident and to believe in themselves a bit more.
In order to empower ourselves and other women, we really need to put ourselves first. It's a heinous comment to make, really. It's almost like it's absolutely ridiculous to mention it, but particularly once we're mothers, we're told to sacrifice ourselves in order to raise other people, in service of others. And actually, I don't think that's the way round. It should be. So I think that when we honour ourselves, when we actually look after ourselves and truly hold on to who we are, then we have a very big hope of being happy and fulfilled, and therefore those around us are fulfilled and happy. We can actually look at some of the myths that are stopping women, and we can stop believing them. We can choose to see that they're myths, they're not truths.
A lot of women and men also put an unnecessary pressure on yourself, and there's no need to do that. At the end of the day, if you have an idea and you put it forward, the worst that can happen is they don't like it. It's not going to really harm anything, but if you don't say anything, then ultimately it's going to be you that carries that weight, and it's not worth it. So I'd say just go for it.
My advice for women going forward is, number one, don't criticise yourself so much. Quite often as women, we complain about our hair and our weight and our height and all sorts, and we compare ourselves to other women. You are fantastic just the way you are. Another thing is, don't let statistics put you off. Like in the construction industry, in the record industry, in banking, a lot of the heads of these corporations tend to be men. But I tell you what, if we can run the country, we can run big corporations, so just remember.